Thanks everybody for coming. I know this is a high stress time, we're nearing the end. And now we get to talk about TPEC, which is going to be your reality next year. So think of it that way, it's exciting. Like this is forward thinking, it's all coming together. And so it's my pleasure to introduce Andy Barker, who is one of our university supervisors. He can tell you about himself and his career and what we really want to share. And then Anzara Miller, who is the director of
Teacher Professional Practice and Evaluation.
In Shoreline.
Longest title ever.
So I'm going to let you guys take it. And for my students, I have the problems of practice forms and the family engagement plans in my hands. Make sure I turn them in. Okay. Or by me. Don't do it by Okay. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, we good?
We're good.
We're good.
All right. So, like Jill said, I work for Shoreline School District as the Director of Teacher Professional Practice and Evaluation. Really, it means that as this new TPEC process came along, I was involved as a teacher leader, and then I got trained to be a Danielson trainer, and now I'm in charge of all of the systems that have to do with evaluation in Shoreline. And I got to work with Andy when he was a teacher there before he retired and became a field supervisor for you. And so we thought it would be great to do a administrator-teacher point of view on kind of what to expect and how it connects to the EdTPA work that you are very much immersed in right now. Anything else to add?
I think that's good.
Okay.
Yeah, let's go.
Okay, so we just want to kind of explain how teacher evaluation, what it is, what it looks like, talk about the framework, and then a lot of people get really freaked out about the student growth, and so I want to just tell you what it really could be, what the intention was, and kind of calm fears about that. So, most of you got a note card, that was our intent. So I would like you, on your note card, to write down something that you know about teacher evaluation, and one question that you have. If you didn't get a note card, there's an extra stack up here, raise your hand, we'll get you a note card. Okay? So we're just going to do just that first part. I'll read the card for you. Or if you don't have a note card and you have a sticky note handy or a scrap of paper, that will also work for this activity. I should have had these transition in so you can read ahead, because I know all of you are teachers and training and going, oh, I'm going to have to stand up and talk to people. Yes. So, now, set your things aside, flip your desk down. You are actually going to have to stand up, and I know this is an awkward room for this, but we're going to make it work. You're going to stand up, and I'm going to model this for you really quickly. Okay? I've got my card. I'm going to stand up, find somebody that maybe I haven't been with all evening, and say, hi, my name's Anzara. Here's the one thing I know. Here's the one thing I have a question about. Andy's going to respond.
We have to write down something you know about teacher evaluation.
Something that you know. He's going to tell me, and then we trade cards.
Yep.
I walk away with his card, he walks away with mine, and then I go find someone else and go, hey, the person I just talked to said this is a question they have and this is something that they know. You gotta swap at least twice. Nod if you're with me.
They're so tired.
I know you guys are tired. Ready? Go! So one thing I totally neglected to do as an instructor was say, yeah, hey, here's how I'm gonna get 100 people's attention. So, Jill uses this. This is my favorite. Like, hey. And I just stand here like this.
My favorite technique is just to shout everybody down.
Yeah. So as we're flashing things out. So Andy's going to take the next part.
Okay, so you've had a chance to trade some cards. If you did this right, you don't have your own card, but if you still have your own that you started with, that's okay too. It's just a chance to kind of hear some other people's ideas. And what we'd like you to do right now is to find a small group of people close to you. If we had tables, we'd all talk around our tables, but we don't. So I'm thinking maybe 3 to 5 people. If you could kind of turn, share what you came up with, and see if you can identify any patterns or themes amongst the things that you heard as you walked around and also the things you have on the cards in your hands right now. And also, is there a question or two that is common to all of you as a group of 3 or 4 or 5 that you think would be worth putting out there for us to address? So we'd like you to kind of think in terms of what's one thing that you might want to raised as a question that might be worth us addressing right now, or certainly during the presentation. So you're going to share themes and patterns. We're not going to share those as a large group, but we are going to share some of the questions that have come up with the large group. Okay, so take a few minutes. Turn around to the people closest to you, 3, 4, 5 people. Share what you found out. One big question. Okay, so we would love to hear whether some questions that you thought were worth the rest of us kind of hearing and knowing about, and for Anzara and I to address here this evening, some of the burning questions. I know a ton of questions. We'll go ahead and start with this.
I think like a question I've heard from a few people is there a passing or a not passing, and how does that work? That's a common thread.
Yeah. So, yes and no. The state law is written that in your first 5 years to get a final score of basic is okay. After you've been teaching for 5 years, a final score of basic triggers that you stay on the comprehensive evaluation, and we'll talk a little bit about comprehensive versus a focused evaluation. And then 2 basics in a row, or 2 out of 3 years, once you have 5 years experience, so you gotta pass that 5-year mark, puts you on a probationary plan. If you're in your first 5 years of teaching and you get a basic, it's saying, hey, this person needs some help and support, and here's what we can do. So if the state were to draw a line of, is there passing, not passing, the bar is set at proficient, so it's a 4 scale, unsatisfactory, basic, proficient, distinguished. The bar gets to proficient after 5 years, and we're trying to make sure that in those first 5, we give you the supports that you need to get there.
So I have a question on your answer. For the Danielson framework, there's a ton of rubrics. And so if you get a basic on twice on one rubric, is that how that works?
Overall score. So
Okay.
there's a formula, and I don't think it's part of this, but you can find it on the TPEP website. You get a score for each of the 22 components of Danielson, right? And then there's 22 components in Danielson, and there's 5 student growth, so that's 27 components. You get a score there, and then there's a mathematical state calculation. Unsatisfactory is 1 point, basic is 2. There's numbers, right? Proficient is 3, distinguished is 4. So it's overall, you get 1 final score at the end. So you can have basics fluttered all throughout and still end up with a proficient or even a distinguished. You can have some along the way. It happens to everybody.
Okay, so it's a combination of scores rather than one triggering.
It's not like, oh, you got 1
Right.
here. The opposite. Other questions?
Up front here.
How should new teachers approach the 27 components? I've seen a couple of examples that it's just overwhelming if you haven't already done it and know what it's all about.
There's lots of different ways, and districts offer different types of support. I would say, as a new teacher, if you're doing your planning appropriately and you get to know your students, then and set up your classroom environment. So for Danielson, it's domains 1 and 2. And each of the frameworks has their ones. But if you focus on planning and setting up your classroom, instruction will follow. So people who don't have the planning and classroom environment piece in place, instruction is not good. So as new folks coming in, those are the things that you know how to do lesson plans. You've had to do lesson plan formats. All of this, be intentional about your planning and be thinking about how to set up a classroom environment and space for kids, management, procedures, transitions. Those are the things that if you don't have in place, that's where I'd start.
And I would also add that with those 27 components, administrator who's observed in your classroom will probably see evidence of 15 of them just in a half an hour sitting. So, a lot of those things are taken care of in an observation or observed in an observation. Your lesson plans may very clearly demonstrate proficiency in, 10 or 15 different components right there. So you have multiple chances for opportunities to provide evidence of the work you do, and very often the things you provide cover multiple parts of the evaluation process.
And we'll show that and also
Yeah.
connect that to the NTPA in a little bit.
How about one more question?
Jill heard a good one.
Okay, yes.
Could you clarify what actual TPEP, what that is in relationship? I know observation, and I know you're evaluating, but the TPEP part of it, we were kind of confused about what exactly the TPEP is.
Okay, well, that's a great segue into one of our first slides, probably. So unless there's one more question, maybe you'll get that answered.
Can I ask one that you might answer later,
Yes.
which would just be, maybe for you, Andy, since you're supervising this year, what are kind of the similarities or differences between like an SPU observation with the IPC and a TPEP observation, just so they can kind of account
And
for.
we've actually
Oh,
kind of
good.
built that into our presentation, so
Okay.
I think we can get on that a little bit. Okay, great.
So structure of TPEP. Thank you for asking that. So TPEP stands for the Teacher Principal Evaluation Project. A lot of districts just say, we're doing TPEP. And really they mean everything that goes underneath for evaluation. So a few years ago, the state changed the structure of evaluation for teachers and principals. Principals are now on a 4-scale, like 4-tiered scale, unsatisfactory to distinguished. And so anytime a district uses TPEP, it's pretty much their generic term for saying everything that has to do with evaluation of teachers and principals right now. So, it's funny, I work with other folks from other districts and they're like, yeah, we do TPEP. And I'm like, what's your framework? What's your evaluation system? Like, TPEP feels really like a generic umbrella that people are saying that they do this. So, the state, here's the 8 criteria that you're going to be evaluated on. They call these the state 8. Okay.
And raise your hand if you've seen these before. Everybody,
Yeah.
everybody's hand. Yeah, remember that you've seen them before.
Thank goodness.
It's our program standard.
Yay! Okay.
So, all right, everyone. These, you have seen these before, and I want to just reiterate that in your student teaching, you have the internship performance criteria, that they are the 8 criteria that are right here. You've written the portfolio entries focusing on specific ones. So that's what this is. That's what you're evaluated against for TPEP, for whatever building, whatever district you're going to be in teaching. It's the same criteria. So SPU's done a really, really good job of giving you that foundational knowledge for the structure of this, of these criteria.
So the question 4 is, as a new person, what do we focus on? Criteria 4 and 5 are the pieces that, as somebody who watches new teachers come into the district, if you can really be solid here, the rest of it tends to fall into place. Okay? So criterions 4 and 5. What we're handing out now is the state 8 and the Danielson framework together. We chose the Danielson one because it's 1 page, and all the other frameworks are multiple pages. And 2, it is the framework that is most used by folks in the Puget Sound area. So, the instructional frameworks, we have the Danielson framework, so you have cell 5 dimensions. A lot of times you'll just hear it as cell or 5D. So that's the short version of that. And then horizontal teacher evaluation model. Not a lot of districts on the west side are doing anything with horizontal. Pretty much everybody in the whole northwest part of the state is Danielson and south. Just so you know. So, here's an example. I took criterion 1, which is centering instruction on high expectations, and then we listed out, and what you have in front of you is Danielson, and you'll notice that this is used here, and I'll let Andy talk about that more. And then here's what horizontal, and here's cell. So you can see they all took their frameworks that was structured in their way that their framework makes sense, and like we shuffled it out under the state aid. That makes sense? So this language should be real familiar.
Yeah, so if you look at an IPC form, you'll see these phrases in criterion 1. And these other ones are the equivalents in the other frameworks. So SPU's been using Danielson, so that's what we're going to.
Okay, so here's Danielson's framework, how she would organize it. She does domains, and it's circular, it's not that there's a typo. She likes to think of it as a cycle. So you plan, you prepare, you set up your environment, you do your instruction, you reflect, you apply, and you do it again. When we talk about framework in our district for teachers, we really look at it from the way it's organized by the framework. It makes more sense. Let's talk about planning. Let's talk about instruction. It's not organized as neatly under the state 8. So when we are doing training for teachers, we really stay looking at the framework.
That's in Shoreline, and a number of districts that are really, really focused on the Charlotte Danielson model for professional growth. They really see the value in organizing it this way. Other districts may not be doing it quite so focused, on that, but they'll still use the Danielson model.
So this is what you have in front of you. And we just wanted to, I'm going to talk a little bit about comprehensive versus focused. So your first 3 years in a district, generally, there's a few exceptions to that. Your first 3 years, you're on what they call the comprehensive evaluation system, which means you are being evaluated on all 8 of those criteria. So the whole page, that's you. After you are no longer a provisional status teacher, you can go into the cycle of 1 year comprehensive, 3 years focused. 1 year comprehensive, 3 years focused. Focus means you pick one of these, one criterion, that's it. That's all you're being evaluated on. So for example, in Shoreline, we're going to talk about criterion 8.
Sure. So the first year that, after I had done all 8 comprehensive criteria, then the next year I was able to go on to just focus on criterion 8, which is about working with professional communities, collegial work, collaborative work with your colleagues. So that year, that was the only part of my evaluation. That's the only thing I was being evaluated on. I wasn't being evaluated on these other criteria. So that it allows you to focus on one thing and kind of really dig deep into that and try to get really good at that particular one.
So we have a lot of teachers right now focusing on criterion 2, and really they're not really focusing on reflecting on teaching. That seems to come easy for folks when we ask questions about the lesson. How did that go? What would you change? What are some things you learned and how you do that? Really, we have people wanting to focus on really upping their game and questioning and discussion techniques. But it's really nice for those folks because they're being evaluated on those 2 things. We add student growth to that. We'll talk about that in a minute. But it's not 27 things. It's those 2 plus student growth.
So do they have to change that every year, or do they get to do that for a couple of years?
Yes. It really depends. It says teachers get to choose and administrators have to approve. So it really depends on the relationship, like what you're working on, and the relationship that you have or what your building is working on with your, what your administrator is saying. So if you said, I want to pick criterion 8, I want to pick criterion 8, I want to pick criterion 8, 3 years in a row, I might be like, so let's look at some other areas that we could continue to grow in. You've mastered this, let's move to the next piece. But at the same time, I've talked to the principals in Shoreline of pick your battles, and that's not one right now. So let's get everybody comfortable knowing the system, knowing the frameworks, and then let's start to say, hey, why don't you pick something different? So we had a building last year who said, we really want to focus on criterion 6, which is about assessment. Using assessment instruction, designing assessment, using data to inform instruction. And she was like, all of our staff meetings are going to support this. So I'd like you to pick this. And if you don't, that's fine. But know that everything that we're doing as a staff together is going to be about using data to inform our instruction and assessment. So your call. Every single staff member who's on focus, pick 6 in her building. So it's a little bit of both. You get to choose, but your admin has to approve. Question?
So I just want to make sure I understand. So you do 8 years of the comprehensive where you're being evaluated on all of it.
3, not 8.
3 years, okay. And then after 3 years,
You can go on focus for 3 years, and then it's 3 years focus, 1 year comprehensive, 3 years focus, 1 year comprehensive.
Okay.
Presuming that you're scoring at a proficient or higher level.
okay.
So when you say proficient level, is that an average proficient level, or all your scores are at least proficient?
Your
Have-
final
have-
score ends up proficient.
Okay.
So you can, like we said before, you can have pieces of that. There can be a basic and a proficient and an overall score of proficient. It just, there's a mathematical formula.
Yeah, it's possible to get a few basics, but predominantly they're proficients in your component breakdowns, and so you end up getting a final score of proficient. But if you end up getting a final score of basic and you've been teaching for 5 years, then you have to stay on the comprehensive system until you can demonstrate proficiency, and then you can roll off and go into the focused. Right?
As an intern, principal will come and observe. So what should I focus on? Criterion 4 and 5, or, am I gonna need to think about that at all?
As an intern and your principal comes to observe, do what you, do your lesson planning, do your written instruction. If we go back to, oops, wrong direction. If I go back to this, Danielson, in an observation where I've had a conversation with the teacher about what they're going to teach, like I've seen a lesson plan or we had a pre-conference conversation, I can get data for everything in domain 1, 2, and 3 in that cycle. So don't worry about what do I have to show. Do your thing. Okay, teach the kids, interact with them, and we'll see it. As an administrator coming in to observe, 15 minutes, sometimes I can get evidence for a lot of this. I do a lot of mad frantic typing and scripting and looking at questions, but that's not, don't worry about it. I really need to see this. Now at the very end, we've had some teachers go, I got 2 basics in pushing and discussion, so I really want you to come in and just look at that. And that sometimes happens after you've done a few observations. Please come in and watch me do this, I think I'm making gains. Okay? And then go in with that singular focus. But generally, first time around, try to kind of get it.
And you're asking just about right now, during your student teaching, the principal's coming in to, just do your thing, and they're just there to see you and see the magic happen and hang out with the kids. Yeah. So I wouldn't worry about any of this with that particular observation. Next year, yeah.
Next year you'll get some, you'll have conversations with your administrator before the observation happens. So here's what I'm looking for, here's how we use it too. Okay.
So you're evaluated comprehensive focus, so on forever, or does it end?
Yes, it ended for me. I retired last June.
So the cycle goes 1 year comprehensive, 3 years focused, 1 year comprehensive, 3 years focused, forever.
Okay.
At least
Till they change it.
till
Until
they
they
change
change
it.
it,
But that's kind of, that's how this is. There's an evaluation that happens every year. How long and detailed that is varies. Okay. Oh, I'm going down the wrong way. My barrels are upside down on me. Okay,
Well,
this.
can I just
yeah.
make one last comment back on this? You might want to take a look at the handout that you got, and you'll notice that the Danielson domains are sprinkled out throughout here. But you might want to just notice where you see domain 1. There's domain 1 there, there's a domain 1 there, domain 1 there. Any place you see that domain 1, that is something that the administrator who's observing you is not going to see when they're physically in the classroom with you. But where they're going to see that is in the lesson plans that you prepare for them in advance. And that's why I want to make a really big plug for the lesson plan template that I'm sure you all have really enjoyed working with this year at SPU. Because what that does is it guarantees you address all of the domain 1 questions. They're all there. If you fill out that template correctly, then your administrator next year, if you use that lesson plan template, they're going to see all of these different aspects of domain 1 and be able to say, okay, this person's got this under control. So then they walk into the classroom and then they see you do, if we go back one slide, when they're actually in the classroom, this is what they're looking at. They're looking at your classroom environment, they're looking at your instruction, but they've already had a chance to see all these components and talk to you about this. So it's real important to make sure you take that lesson planning seriously for those 2 observations you have that year. Do detailed, have that conversation ahead of time so they can see your thought process, your planning process, your pedagogy, etc.
Are the observations scheduled, or is one a drop-in
This is where it gets really into what specific districts you go to and what the contract language says there. Generally, there's both. A scheduled, I know they're coming, we have a pre-conference, they're coming this time, this day, right? And then there are districts who do drop-in observations or unscheduled observations where they just come in and sit down and watch. But specific district contract language is going to be let you know what's allowed per the bargaining agreement wherever you happen to get a job. So that isn't state law. State law says you have to have 2 observations for a total of 60 minutes. How the contracts and the districts have interpreted what that is depends. Okay, you're welcome. This is a map of district selection by framework for the state of Washington. So 105 districts have chosen Danielson, 91 with Marzano, and 99 for South. If you go percent, you'll see this is the Puget Sound area is really Danielson heavy. So it's good to know if you're looking for a job and you want to know what framework the district is using. It is on the TPEP website. Handy. I look at that all the time. Oh, they're coming from where? Did they use Danielson there? Oh, they did. Great. Oh, they're coming from that district. I'm going to have to train them up. So, because I know that when we get new administrators, I have to make sure they know Danielson. So I always check to see what framework they're coming from. So, it's a fun one. Okay, so we talked a little bit about what the state law says is for the observation cycle. Comprehensive is all 8. 3 years when your provisional status. Focus is 1. Your admin has to approve. This is what the state law says about observation. So we kind of covered that already. Questions about that? Again, your specific contract that you have for your district is going to be much more detailed than this. But here's what the state law says.
And if you look really closely, 60 minutes for the whole year. That's
Not
it.
very much.
That's not very much. So you've got 2 visits, a half hour each. So really what you can expect, I just saw this last week with one of the candidates I'm working with. His teacher was being evaluated by the assistant superintendent or assistant principal came in about partway through the classwork period, sat down with a notepad, took some notes as people were going off a few times, and then a half hour later she got up and walked out. And that was that. That was the whole spring observation for that teacher. That's so different than what I'm doing when I come to visit my teaching candidates every month. I spend the whole class period and do a lot of debriefing afterwards. So you're getting a much richer observation and feedback experience this year than you're going to get professionally. And that's a good thing because people aren't staring at you the whole time and scrutinizing your work. At the same time, it's a little harder for them to get a really good picture of who you are as a teacher. So you have to kind of know that's going to be the reality.
Question up there?
Yeah, maybe you're going to answer this, but I was just wondering what provisional 1, 2, 3, what those mean.
It means it's your first year of teaching. Provisional 1 means it's a type of a continuing contract that the state has. And your first year of teaching, you are a provisional 1 teacher. Your second year, you're 2. Third year, you're 3. Now that's presuming you stay in the same school district. So we get teachers in Shoreline. We had somebody who taught in Seattle for 15 years, but they're new to our district. They bounce back to provisional 3 for their first year in our district because they had at least 2 years of experience in state. So we start them at 3. So everybody new to a district is on a provisional status for 1 year. And that provisional 3 requires 3 observations. It's kind of that check. Is this, let's be in there more, let's give them some more support. So provisional status teachers actually tend to get more observations than our continuing contract teachers who've kind of been in the system and doing this more frequently. Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay.
And most buildings, highly functioning schools will do a really assertive effort at supporting those provisional 1, 2, and 3, your first 3 years of teaching. They probably will try to observe more than just that 60 minutes, and they will try to provide the kind of safety net for you to be successful.
a lot of times there's mentor teachers available, lots of other support available. But, this is the minimum requirements of the state law, which is the only thing I can say is for sure going to be your commonality when you go out to all the districts. So we've been doing questions along the way. I'm going to pop to the next section, which is student growth. Okay, so there's a lot of misconceptions out there about this. So I had said before there's 5 student growth components, and this was, the state decided on the new evaluation framework, or the new evaluation system, identified their frameworks, and then Washington was involved in the race to the top. I don't know if you remember hearing about that, but that part of that application said that they had to use student growth as a component of teacher evaluation. So that got added on top. Now we didn't win the race, but we still have student growth. So, but as Andy was telling somebody, we had a really great steering committee in Washington that said, we can have student growth, but it's growth that's important to the teachers, and it's not the state tests that are student growth. Teachers get to identify the data that they want to use for the student growth measures. So that is you decide what measures you're using to show growth of the students in your class while they're with you.
It's classroom assessment data as opposed to state assessment data. And there are many states in the country where it's the state test that determines whether, how you get evaluated. We're lucky in Washington. It's a little more authentic.
What could be some examples
Uh,
of what kinds of things that teachers choose for their criteria, for their own score?
Maybe not.
No, we just have the rubric.
It's there someplace, but anything you do on a given day in teaching, the exit slips you collect, the little quizzes you get, the checkpoints, the journal entries that as long as you're tracking a learning target, you're seeing how the kids are doing, you're keeping track of that data. And then, of course, yes, you're going to have some summative assessments as well, but all those things can go together. So it's what you decide.
Some examples, we had a 4th grade team who really wanted to focus on writing. So they said our students are going to grow in their ability overall to produce a 5-paragraph essay, and they cited the Common Core standards about writing. And then, their first trimester, they were working on introductory paragraphs and topic sentences, and they kind of broke it down, but they had kids the first week of school write a 5-paragraph essay on this, no instruction, right? There's your baseline. And now we're going to give explicit instruction on topic sentences, and introductory paragraphs, and supporting details, and how do we cite the text, and blah, blah. Then they did midpoints along the way. So here's my intro, here's what they could write in December, and now here's what they can write in May. Gosh, they learned. It was as simple as that. We had librarians do this, and they picked character traits. Can students identify character traits of the characters in books? When they asked some questions about reading a book the first time, then they talked about what pieces of the story can you use to help determine character traits, and did some teaching on that, and then a little quiz at the end. So it's what are you teaching, where you can get a before and a after. So there's a team goal that you need to do, so everybody who teaches 4th grade, or everybody who teaches English 9, or hopefully you have a team. There's other people who are teaching what you're teaching. You have a team goal, there's a whole class goal, and a small group goal. And the rubrics are a little bit like this. So 3 of the 5 rubrics for student growth are about just writing a goal. Did you establish a goal? That's it. Right? That's not even growth. That's like, I have a goal for my kids to learn. We can do that. 2 of them, the small group and the whole class, you have to show data. You don't have to show data for the team, because your evaluation shouldn't depend on whether your colleagues did their work and have their students grow. Okay? So, out of all of the components, there's 5 about student growth, but really when you look at it, there's 3 about goal setting and 2 about student growth. So that kind of just shrinks the whole thing down. So it's not as scary and big as it might seem like it is.
Now, right now, you guys are all immersed in a TPA. Task 3 is assessment. And there's some pretty strong similarities here about setting goals and then tracking data to see how kids are doing during that sequence of lessons that you're analyzing. The big difference in the state evaluation process is clear evidence of growth for most students. So in the TPA, you have to analyze and break down that data. Which kids are getting it, which ones aren't, what does that tell me for future instruction? That's real important, but for the state, you actually have to show that most of your kids did actually grow in that particular learning target. So you have to demonstrate evidence of achievement. And that's different than the TPA, where you don't have to prove that your kids learned from you. You just have to prove that you understood what they learned. Does that make sense? And what you're going to do with that.
So we have a question back here and then on front.
Are there different rubrics for special ed, or is it all the same?
It's all the same.
Okay.
You write your goals. I mean, with IEP goals writing, this part is really easy, the writing of the goal, and you're tracking data all the time. Our special ed teachers actually find student growth to be the easiest thing. They're like, what is the big deal? I do this all day. So, no, not different rubrics. And question up here.
Yeah, I was just wondering, for showing evidence of student growth for most students, are you supposed to show that analyzing individual students, or like 75% of my class improved if I'm looking at like the group number?
Depends. Depends on how your district defines that.
Okay.
And, yeah.
Some districts have percentages attached. The rubric for basic is some students, rubric for proficient is most, and the rubric for distinguished is nearly all. Some districts have put percentages on those. Some districts have not. And we aren't going to do that in the one because some classes are a class of 4, and some, it's not equitable to do that. So we have people identify their target at the beginning of the year. So if I had high growth, what would that look like? If most of my students made it, what does that look like? And then it's a conversation with you and your administrator.
So that's an ideal situation where you get to define what the growth is and what most would mean.
Yeah.
But not all districts are going to have that as an opportunity. They may have some set percentages.
Other questions? Okay. So you just talked about it.
Yeah, so we can actually skip
You can
this.
skip that one?
Yeah.
So really, this is just a cycle about goal setting. You set a goal. So you look at here's my student data, here's what I have to teach, here's the goal I'd like to get them to do. I target my instruction, I do some formative assessment, I look at where we're at. Did we meet the target? Oh, no, I gotta reteach that. So I determine the next steps and I go back here, and it's just kind of a cycle.
Right. And the benefit is you have really the whole school year, up to the whole school year, to go through this process a few times with kids on a learning target. So you don't have to do it in a sequence of 3 lessons, whatever. You can try it again, kind of get better and get better at it throughout the course of a unit or a semester or a year.
So here's some different ways you can show student growth. It's not, here's my Excel spreadsheet with my, color-coded growth. It really can be super, here's what they knew at the beginning, we did some teaching, here's now what they know, here's what they added. It really is the classroom assessments that you're using to show growth. So we're going to have you turn that Danielson page over because it's blank on the other side. It was, unless you pick it up, or your note card, or think and process with your elbow partner. But we'd like you to take just 2 minutes and think about what you know about TPEP and EdTVA. Where does it intersect? What's different? Andy pointed out a few things that are different. And just have you do a little processing, and then we'll show you 2 more slides, and we're good.
Oh, wait, I have an important announcement, too.
You lost a buzz. I know, I can see how entertaining we are, but that's okay. It is 7 o'clock after a long day. So I just want to tell you a couple of little things. There are different systems the districts use to track and hold all the evaluation stuff. Eval is one of the systems that the state has provided that's out there. It does a great job of holding all the information, and it's like the slowest, most tedious. website ever, but it's not a big notebook or binder or Apple Crate or, oh, I can't remember where I put that. Is it in the Dropbox or is it in the Google Drive? So if you have an opportunity to choose something that you create or eval, here's my plug, choose eval. It organizes it for you. You don't get stuff lost. It's super secure. It's a good thing.
Thank you.
It's just really slow, so don't expect it to move as fast as everything else does. Okay. And if you have not visited the TPEP website, super wealth of information. You can look up all the district things, all the stuff, the things I hand out to people in my district, the Danielson framework, the Marzano framework, it's all downloadable from their website. So as a way to prep for interview or know what you're gonna be evaluated on, everything you would need to have to get started is on the TPEP website. And we're done.
Yay! Don't leave.
Does anybody have questions?
Wait, just wait 1 sec. Guys, you can wait 1 minute, please. It's 6:57. We did this tonight, even though you're tired and fried, because we think it's our responsibility in the teacher education program to give you some information about TPEP and help you make connections about what you've already done this year and what you will be doing. You hopefully saw a lot of connections. You can talk about that in job interviews. You can talk about that in your draft professional growth plan. So try to take away some nuggets from tonight. My important announcement is 2 weeks from tonight on the 25th, in all of our sections, no matter who your instructor is, we are going to take a few minutes to do some program evaluation. So you'll do a quick evaluation on the program overall. Just takes a few minutes on your mentor teacher or mentor teachers and on your supervisor. It's really important information that we take really seriously. So I just wanted to let you know that that's coming in 2 weeks, and please bring a laptop or tablet or some way that you'll be able to access the link that we will post so that you can do that. Okay? So thank you. Have a good evening. Thank you to Andy.